All right, hello and welcome to the Assessment 3 Q&A Collaborate. It's pretty hard to believe that we're here already, but here we are. Assessment 2 behind us and on the way to Assessment 3. I'd like to welcome to the session today our wonderful ELAs, Carolyn, Erin and Karen. And they will be working away in the chat box, and I will be mostly answering questions on the audio, but of course the other ELAs are welcome to jump in anytime as well, in case I've got anything to add, or maybe they might be able to answer a question better than me. So feel free to jump in, ELAs, whenever you like. Okay, is everyone feeling excited to be up to the last assessment? Anybody? Give me a smile or a happy face. Yay. Yep. Yay. Final one. I know it gets a little bit tricky with the third one, especially if you are in other units as well and you feel the pressure a bit of multiple assessments coming all at the same time. But anyway, good luck with all that. Let's get started. Okay, so just wanted to make sure that you're all aware that there was a flipped Collaborate posted over the weekend, and that takes you through all the basics of the assessment. And there's a tip sheet as well that was in the announcement, in the same announcement, that gives you a bit of a guide on things like word count and so on. And lots of other handy tips as well for Assessment 3. Has everybody managed to find that tip sheet? Yeah, great. And you would like the PowerPoint of the Collaborate session, of the flipped Collaborate. Yep, that's fine. I can certainly get that out to everybody. No problem at all. All right. Okay, so the idea of the flipped Collaborate, of course, is that you would have all had a chance to watch that and go through the basics of the assessment. And then this session today is really focused on answering any questions that you still have outstanding about the assessment. So we are going to kick off straight away with any questions. I'm going to suggest a couple of things in regards to throwing questions out there. Firstly, if you wouldn't mind giving me, before you ask a question, put a little, we'll say a love heart emoji in front of your question. And that way, when I'm madly going through the chat box trying to find your questions, I'll be able to identify very quickly which is a question. So just a little love heart and then ask the question. The other thing I'd like to suggest is if you can already see that there are 10 tons of questions and we're still working our way through those and trying to answer them, just if you wouldn't mind just holding off until we get through them. If you understand what I mean, just try and pace the questions a little bit. Sometimes it can just be a bit overwhelming if there's like 20 questions all at once and we're trying to get through them. So if we pace the questions, it's much more likely that your question won't get missed. But hopefully the ELAs can also alert me to any question if I miss it. Okay, all right, let's start with any burning questions. Do you have anything that you're already wondering or anything you already would like to ask? Please go ahead and post in the chat. Oh, really? No questions? Maybe they're taking a while to come through. Okay, all right, very hard to differentiate between a behaviour support plan and a management strategy. Okay, Jacqueline, so a behaviour support plan or behaviour management plan is often a type of contract between the teacher and the student, and it's very much focused on the particular behaviours, you know, whether they're going to, you know, if there's certain behaviours the teacher is trying to prevent or stop, then the behaviour management plan will address those behaviours. It's much more, what's the word? I'm losing my words tonight. It's much more of a reflex reaction to the behaviour. So it's not really a preventative approach. It's more, let's just say there was a contract and the contract said, if Daniel displays these behaviours, he will get a reward. If he displays these behaviours, he will lose 5 points. So it's just very closely managing the behaviour itself. It's not looking at the causes or the root of the behaviour. Yeah, so very structured. It often takes the form of a contract. It's, yeah, a report style. Sorry, is that what you're talking about, Carolyn? But it would look a little bit perhaps like a report. It might be something that the teacher signs in. Maybe the parent also accesses the plan as well. There might be even a coordinator or a welfare coordinator who has some kind of input into the Sorry, guys, I lost everyone just then. I got bumped out. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. So, look, I suppose, yay, I'm back. All right, so I suppose that, the main point behind all of that is that this whole unit is about trying to implement strategies that are preventative rather than just responsive. So trying to actually get to the heart of that behaviour first, or to prevent it from escalating any further. Okay, I'm just going to go back in the chat to earlier questions and work my way through them. Okay, so, all right, so Michelle. Okay, so the format of this assessment is not really an essay. It's more of a report format. However, there are going to be elements of this report that is written in a discussion, as a discussion, in the same way that you would an essay. So, for example, the analysis section and also the finding section, you would write in the same way that you would write an essay. So it takes the form of a discussion with references throughout. Your introduction, which is really just a description of the case study rather than an introduction, is probably a little bit more report style. And also your recommendations at the end are a bit more in the report style. You might want to do your recommendations in dot points, for example. You won't be expected to do a conclusion like you would with a normal essay. So, Michelle, does that answer the question? Great. Okay. I'm loving all these little love hearts. It really helps me find the questions in the chat box. Okay. Kimberly's question, is functional behaviour analysis a strategy? I wouldn't think so. It depends on if you're using that analysis as part of a strategy. I mean, you've got a whole section that's all about analysis and behaviour, analysing the behaviour. Yeah, it could be part of a strategy for sure. It would mean that you would need to make sure that included in your approach that you have actually come up with solutions for working with the behaviour and for actually preventing the behaviour. So it certainly could be part of a whole strategy, but if you focus just on the analysis part, then that's not really coming up with a solution, and we're looking for solutions for these students. Kimberly, if you're going to use functional behaviour analysis as your strategy, then it would need to be in the strategy section. If you're just going to use it to help you with the analysis of the behaviour, then it can just be in that analysis section. So it depends on really how you're going to use FBA. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think the thing is with the word strategy is a term that gets thrown around a lot. So I guess the main thing is to make sure that when you're thinking of strategy, you're thinking of ways or approaches that you are using in order to support the behaviour of the child, in order to make those improvements. All right, we're all up to date with questions. Thank you, Karen. Any others? No? That is awesome. All right, we are going to move through. I thought we might just have a little bit of a go at talking about one of our case studies. We'll talk about Michael, who is our 10 case study, and just maybe have a look at how we might approach this case study if it were at your assessment. So one of the things to keep in mind is that no one size fits all, and each child needs to be carefully considered on the behaviour we can see. Let's work through this case study as we would approach the assessment. So firstly, the first thing to do is to describe your case study in your own words. So we prefer not to see a copy and paste job. We just want to see you articulate this case study in your own way, hopefully covering off most of the important information in there. You only need about 100 words to do this. But anyway, so let's have a look. We've got Michael, who's in grade 6. He's wetting the bed and having toilet accidents at school. He's seeing 2 health professionals. One is a family therapist for his parents' recent divorce. The other is a psychologist for anger management. Michael says he thinks his anger attacks issues are getting better, but he has trouble managing his panic attacks. Michael has no friends at school. He doesn't seem able to connect with his peers. The school has said that his emotional and social development is their priority, and is becoming increasingly difficult for Michael as his schoolwork and skill development are low compared to his peers, and he is aware of this. His teacher is conflicted as he is not reaching curriculum milestones. There is talk of retaining Michael in grade 6. Okay, so you recognise this case study already from the previous assessment. But we're going to approach this as we would for assessment 3. Okay, Jacqueline, let's have a look at the question here. You have said in the flipped collab that the strategies are the new part added on to assessment 1 and 2, but we have already used these, i.e. implementation of a resource in assessment 2, including strategies. Okay, yeah, fair point, Jacqueline. We did go a little bit into strategies for assessment 2. The main emphasis for assessment 2 was your ability to match the behaviour with a resource, and certainly part of that was, of course, you would have to implement that resource. So yes, I guess we did touch on it, but I think in this case for assessment 3, the focus is much more on your teaching strategies, on your pedagogy, on how you're managing the classroom, and how you're managing the individual, as well as how that will fit with the other children in the class. So it's much more in depth when it comes to pedagogy. Yeah. Kimberly, identifying behaviours in introduction or in analysis? No. So in the introduction, which is about 100 words, you would only introduce the case study briefly, and then you will be identifying and discussing the behaviours in the analysis section. Yeah. Melodies, are strategies more like inquiry approach differentiation? Yes, they can be. I mean, you could say that they are models of learning, but yeah, you could also call them strategies. As I said, that word strategies does get thrown around quite a bit, often and used in different ways. Often strategies, I see strategies as the smaller part of a bigger approach. So if you had inquiry learning, or an inquiry learning approach, for example, that might be your model of learning, and your strategy might be to sit down and work out what the inquiry topic is with each child, or it might be that groups of children sit together to discuss their inquiry topics. So strategies is really, I see the strategies as a smaller part, the smaller parts that make up the whole bigger approach. And the whole bigger approach might be called a learning model or a teaching approach. Yeah. Karen's also saying A3 also includes working with families, community and support agencies. Yeah, that's a very good point. That is also another consideration that is extra that you haven't really covered much before. So also working outside the classroom to support the child. Okay, so Kimberly, application of models. What's your question there? I'm not quite sure. If you can just elaborate on that question a little bit, Kimberly, I'll just move on for now. Oh, yes. Yes, so in terms of, applying the models of learning, there might be particular strategies within that model of learning. Exactly. Yeah, so it's the way you apply the model of learning. Perfect. All right, so the first thing we're going to do here is to discuss what the behaviours are as part of your analysis. So what kind of behaviours, in the chat box if you don't mind, can you identify here in the case study? Yeah. Yeah, anxiety, bedwetting, frustration. Yeah. Engagement issues, lack of connection. There's a lot, isn't there? Anger, impulsiveness. I think Michael was a very tricky case study, even in terms of our last assessment as well. Issues to self-esteem. Yep, definitely. Yeah. Okay. Great. So lots of behaviours there that you can pull out of that case study. Now, the other thing you'll have to do as part of your analysis is to try to understand the behaviour. This is something you've already done before in previous assessments. You might use a behaviour theory such as Bronfenbrenner, for example, to discuss these behaviours. I wouldn't go too deeply into describing any kind of behaviour theory, but certainly refer to it when you are talking about the socio-cultural influences are very important in this unit. So just very quickly, what might be some familial or cultural or ethical considerations related to this case? So what are some of those background considerations that we might think about in terms of the behaviour? Just in the chat box, guys, just some ideas on family or cultural or ethical considerations. Yeah. Okay, so great. He's socially isolated. Could be modelling his parents. Yeah. Definitely trauma. There's been some very traumatic events happening in his life. Yeah. The divorce. Lack of control. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Privacy issues to consider to protect the situation. Lack of emotional warmth. Yeah. Okay, great. And can you just quickly, the bedwetting thing. I mean, that's not really quite sure what's going on there at home or what might be causing that. Yeah, must consider the ethics behind seeing health professionals' privacy. Good one, Daniel. Great. Panic attacks causing toileting issues could be, yeah. Excellent. Okay, what are some possible theories that in your analysis that you might refer to when discussing behaviour? We won't go into all the theories, but what are some of the theories that might apply here to Michael? Attachment theory, great. Bronfenbrenner, yes. Yep, any others? Maslow, definitely Maslow. Humanism, yep. There could potentially be cognitive theory as well. He's low with his skill development compared to peers. So the curriculum, yep, thank you. Social theory, Daniel, that's great. His inability to keep up with his peers with his schoolwork and skill development could potentially be based in emotional causes, but it could also be cognitive as well, or it could be a combination of both. So he is quite a complex case, our Michael. So consider a few possibilities when discussing behaviour rather than getting bogged down in just one possibility. All right, excellent. Okay, so keep in mind that there are numerous factors that might be influencing the behaviour here, and try to identify some key issues in terms of how we're going to support the learner. So Michael's issues, he really needs a holistic approach because he has multiple issues going on here, emotional, probably cognitive as well, academic, and so on. Jordan, would we discuss numerous theories or just touch on one? Look, it depends on what you can manage with your word count. I don't think you need to go into a lot of depth with your theories. So it's quite possible you're able to fit in a couple of theories. You might also, yeah, but that's totally up to you. All right, so we've discussed and analysed the behaviour in here using theory, thinking about sociocultural influences, considering family background and so on. And that will be your whole analysis section. So that's your 500 to 600 words, focusing purely on the behaviour. The next section will be your findings. So in your findings, you use the information and your understandings of the behaviour to consider a range of strategies and interventions that might support the student. Okay, so yeah, there's not really another slide, Jacqueline. We're still looking at the slide with Michael. Yeah, there's not a lot of slides in this PowerPoint. Okay, so the next section is your findings section. And this was probably the section that will be a little bit new to you in your writing. And we're talking about now in this section, identifying and discussing a range of effective strategies and interventions that could support the learner. So let's have a go at some ideas, shall we? What strategies and interventions might support Michael? And maybe when you're suggesting a strategy, perhaps also mention what element of Michael's difficulties we're addressing here. Christy, do we need to cover all weekly topics from relationship with self, relationship with others, curriculum and environment in the analysis? No, that's not a silly question at all. I really think it just depends a little bit on what you've discussed in terms of your behaviour and the case study that you've chosen. But if we look at Michael, for example, he definitely covers all of those. It certainly wouldn't hurt to cover all of them if you can with the word count that you have. I mean, Michael for here has got relationship with self issues, relationship with others, curriculum, and definitely we need to look at the learning environment. And certainly when it comes to writing your assessment, you'll definitely have to identify how to prepare the physical and social environment that contributes to the child's relationship with others. So yeah, it is going to depend a little bit on your case study, but definitely coming up with a range of strategies and looking at the environment is important. Daniel, I think you're going to need to do further research for strategies. That is, like, really researching your pedagogy is going to be pretty important in this. But let's have a look. Let's come up with some ideas. What are some strategies for Michael that you can think of? Using collaborative tools with either peer coaching or group assessments to help his relationship issues. If Michael can work on his relationship, it will help him feel included. Perfect. Great, Melody. Fantastic. All right, what are some other strategies? Mediation in groups and individualities. Oh, meditation. Meditation, yes. Yeah. That could definitely be a good strategy for Michael in terms of possibly his anger management and his stress levels. Yeah, I know that many of you have already written about this and you've already talked about the physical and the learning environment. So how about some of those ideas? We have to settle Michael's emotions before we can have him pursue his curriculum milestones. Yeah, potentially. It could also kind of work side by side as well. Yeah, breathing techniques, meditation. So I think it's important with Michael to consider him holistically, and it probably will be the same when you're looking at your other scenarios as well. So there's definitely emotional needs that he has. Kimberly's saying, oh, classroom routines, that's a good one, Tara, to help him feel a bit more safe. Cooperative learning activities, social and cognitive, perfect. Class layout design for optimal interaction. Yeah, have a space in the room to be alone. Excellent. Buddy system outside the classroom. Positive and inclusive environment. Yeah, preventative strategies, the idea of being able to use a cool down pass. Yeah, fantastic. Great. Any more ideas? No. Okay. Praise from the teacher. Yeah, I would want to. I'm not sure if praise from the teacher. It certainly could be mentioned. I'm not sure if it would be a strategy on its own. Maybe it's part of a bigger strategy, perhaps. Great strategies for toilet, quick exit to the toilet, fantastic. Yeah. All right, these are all really great ideas. Okay, so I guess this section, I mean, there's going to be lots of pedagogies that you'll look into here. We haven't had any from the outside community or the parenting yet. Now, I know in the case of Michael, it might not be as relevant because he's already getting some outside assistance. But when you're doing your case studies, don't forget that you also need to think about bringing in, you know, some outside support. So whether it's community or the parenting or outside services. So Tamara, communication with parents, yep, that would work for Michael. Having some kind of, could be a journal that you write in, or could have, you know, regular meetings perhaps. Okay, could you say if this assignment we're not just looking for a resource strategy, but explaining how we will use it and the rationale behind it? Yes, Daniel, you're absolutely correct. I was just about to go on to that. Kimberly, would working with the supports currently in place be sufficient? Do you mean for Michael, or? I think, yeah, I think we're looking for this assessment to include some kind of outside support as well. I think you'll find that that's in the rubric, that we're looking for some kind of outside support, whether that's the community, parenting, or services, outside services or educational services. Okay, so Daniel, as you've pointed out, it's not really just about listing the strategies. That's a good place to start. But you're going to need to explain why those strategies that you've chosen or those interventions are suitable to Michael or whoever it is. So you'll definitely need to make links. That's really important. And you might even be able to explain the relationship between the behaviour theories and the approach that you've chosen. That would be kind of next level if you can do that as well. You know, how you might make use of policy frameworks as well, and external support organisations. You'll need to demonstrate the importance of working inclusively with families and community. Okay, can I confirm on behalf of one of my students it's okay to refer to more than one strategy in the findings section? Absolutely. The findings section should have multiple strategies in it. Absolutely should have multiple strategies. The finding section is like a brainstorming almost. So you're meant to come up with as many strategies as you can within the word count, but you also obviously have to be able to justify those and rationalize those. So Michelle, in the findings section, you are coming up with multiple strategies. And hopefully multiple strategies that look at the child holistically. In the recommendations, what you do following on from that is you basically say, okay, I've got all of these ideas for interventions and strategies. I've explained why they will help the child. But now in the recommendations, and you'll only have 200 to 300 words for this, in the recommendations, you will actually pick out the strategies that you think are going to be the most effective. And then you're going to say, these are my recommendations. Out of all the strategies that I've come up with, I'm going to bring it down to maybe just a few important recommendations that I think should be followed. Yes, Melody, I would say that only the recommendations need to be in dot points. Everything else can be in paragraphs. Look, we're not completely ruling out dot points in the other sections, but I wouldn't recommend it because it's the findings and the analysis are really meant to be in discussion mode. There's nothing saying that you can't use a few dot points, but I wouldn't. I would stay away from it if possible, but definitely use the dot points in your recommendations. Your recommendations are, it's kind of like you've had your brainstorm, you've gone, okay, here's all my ideas, here's all my strategies to make sure that I've considered everything. Now, if I was really going to recommend to the teacher, because you can't do everything, there's lots of possibilities, but you can't do everything. So in your recommendation section, you're going to say, well, this is my recommendations for the teacher for this case study. The recommendations are, you might have something that's community or parent focused. You might have something that is focused on academic. You might have something that's focused on meeting the child's emotional needs. So I would choose a range of recommendations that cover all of the needs of the child. So it might be 3 or it might be 4 main recommendations, possibly. There's no set number, but if you're approaching the child holistically, you're probably going to find it's at least 3 or 4 recommendations at the end. Yes, you can have headings, Melody. That's fine. Yeah, absolutely. Is it acceptable to tailor chunks of text from assignment 2? Yeah, that's fine, Jordan. Absolutely. Just make sure, obviously, that you're meeting all the criteria and it is relevant to the particular child. But yes, you're allowed to reuse your own work. Just be careful of, you don't want to come up too high in the plagiarism report if you can avoid it. But yep, that's fine. Yeah, definitely need to make sure you're referencing properly. Do we need to cite from the assignment? No, Heather, you don't need to cite from the assignment. That's fine. Okay. No, look, it actually doesn't count as plagiarism if you use your own work. It's just that, you know, it will give you a higher Turnitin count probably, and it just means that your ELA will then have to investigate a little bit and have a look at why those words have matched. If you're going to use a lot of text from a previous assessment, I would maybe put a note in that in your assessment. I wouldn't encourage doing this really. You're allowed to do it. I just wouldn't encourage it. It can make things a little bit messy. But you know, if you've got a really relevant piece of information that you've used once before and you want to reuse it, it's okay. Just be very careful. Don't go too crazy on reusing previous work. Yeah, that's fine, Jordan. Yeah, Turnitin can be a bit frustrating, but look, ELAs, if they see a high plagiarism score, it doesn't necessarily mean, or high Turnitin score, it doesn't necessarily mean there's plagiarism. It does often count the reference lists, so we just ignore that. And I guess the main thing to make sure of is that you're paraphrasing your source of information. You're not just, copying and pasting huge chunks of information from your sources. Yeah, we always look at your score to see how it's been determined. Exactly, that's right, Erin. I mean, you can have a plagiarism charge when your Turnitin match is only 4%. If it's just been a direct copy of someone else's work and it's not been referenced, or your score could be up as high as 40%, and it doesn't necessarily mean plagiarism. So that piece of information is only a small part of what we use to check for plagiarism. Oh, thanks, Karen. Karen's giving an example of how to reference your own work. Brilliant. Yeah, it also would be good to put a little note at the beginning of your assessment if you're going to do that. Good one. Okay, I'm going to move to the next slide, which is, I just wanted to just show you here how you're being assessed in each section of your case study. So in the analysis section, you're looking at the facts and the behaviours. What do they mean and what theory can be used to explain it? This is assessing or addressing criteria 1, which is your knowledge and understanding of behaviour. In the findings section, you're using the information and your understanding of behaviours to consider a range of strategies and interventions that might support the student. This is addressing criteria 2 and 3, being able to critique and analyse a case study and applications of strategies for classroom practice. The recommendation section is really where you're applying your theory into practice. So you've done your research, you've done your brainstorming, you've come up with strategies, and now you're going to actually recommend which strategies you think will work best in the classroom. So that is also addressing criteria 3. Okay. Any questions before we have a little look at the rubric? Okay, now I did go on quite a bit about the past level of the rubric in the flipped collaborate, so I don't want to repeat myself here. Just a reminder that you do need to cover off all of those dot points for us to be able to pass you. Are there any particular questions about the past level of the rubric? No? You will see dot point 4, demonstrating understandings and plans for working inclusively with families or community or support agencies. We kind of tweaked the rubric a little bit here. The original rubric on the assessment sheet says families and community and support agencies, but we, ELAs and also the academic involved in this assessment, we have all agreed that as long as you consider either families or community or support agencies, then you'll still be eligible to pass. We're just very conscious of your word count in this assessment, which is tight. But if you don't cover off any of those, then you can't pass. You have to cover off at least one. Yeah, Kimberly, you have a question specific to one of the case studies. Do you want to go on the microphone, or would you like to post your question to the chat? Feel free. All right, in the meantime, if there are no more questions about the pass level, oh, okay, that's fine. Balan, he mentions he spends some time in foster care. Is he currently in care? That's a good question. Oh, it's going to rack my brain there. Let me just have a quick look, or maybe one of the ELAs can have a quick look at that scenario. I think you can assume he is. That's fine. It says he spends some time in foster care. So I think the most important part about Balan here is that he is in and out of foster care. I'm not sure if it matters whether you assume he's in foster care in the current time or he's been in foster care in the past, but he's obviously in and out. He spends periods of time in foster care, then back at home. Yeah, look, when I read it, I remember assuming that he wasn't in it at the time, but I'm not sure how much it's going to matter. The main point is that he's in and out. Yeah. But if it's relevant to the case that you're building, then that's okay. Then mentions carers later. Yeah, well, I think carers as in foster carers. Yeah. Melody, do we discuss the family community aspect in the recommendation? In the recommendation, you would propose a strategy that involves involves either family or community or a support agency. Yes, I would definitely include at least one recommendation that covers off those points. Okay. Yeah, great. All right. Hopefully we've covered that. Let's just move on to the next part. Okay, the credit section. Does anyone have any questions about the credit level of the rubric? This is where you're expected to provide an in-depth knowledge of the context by considering numerous factors influencing behaviour. There's a clear identification and understanding of key issues. The use of theory and practice is both evident by the strategies chosen. I think as we go higher up in the rubric, we're expecting to see a little bit more critical thinking, a bit more clarity in the writing, making the links between theory and practice is something we really look for at the higher end of the rubric as well. And you know that your response is quite holistic as well. Can you score a credit if you only mention one of the following family, community, or support networks? Yep, I believe you can, as long as you do that really well. Okay, distinction. This is where we're looking for a high order analysis by considering the eclectic approach for preventative measures. Okay, so very big emphasis on the strategies being preventative. Your examples are effective and thorough. There is skilled integration of theory and practice, and some original or perceptive interpretations are developed. So that really means that we're starting to see your own voice coming through at the distinction level. You haven't just kind of pasted together lots of information that you've got here, there, and everywhere, that you've actually convinced us that you have a thorough and comprehensive understanding of the way that your theory and your practice are linked. So it really is, we really expect to hear your voice at this level. And that you've got a capacity for critical and creative thinking as well. Any questions on the distinction level? No? Okay, and finally, the high distinction level, added on top of everything they've already achieved at the other levels of the rubric, there's comprehensive research and coverage of the topic, integrating a wide range of perspectives about the importance of preparing a suitable environment for the learner and supporting the development. There's a creative, innovative synthesis of ideas and clarity of thinking. All right, that's all of the rubric. Any questions about the rubric or any levels? Where does Department of Education support fit in? Well, it could be a policy or a framework. It depends on what part of the Department of Education, Kimberly. I know Department of Education does have particular services that can support students. Yeah, but if you're talking about curriculum documents, that would not be considered external support. Anywhere where an outside organisation either comes into the school to support the child, or the child goes to that organisation for extra support. In regards to Ballant, it mentions he has a diverse family background. Wouldn't it be hard to give specific recommendations for family and community without knowing exactly what background? Hope that's not a silly question. I think diverse family background is really just talking about the fact that he goes in and out of different families. That his family background is not typical as such, in that he doesn't go home to the same family at the end of every day. So I think that's all that really means. So I think in terms of so it's not routine. So in terms of your strategies and interventions, you might be looking to give him something that helps him, to have some kind of stability. So his family background is much more complicated or complex, as Karen said, than a typical student. There you go, Erin, that's one. We had some students who went to Bernardo's for additional support. Brilliant. Okay, issues with the library. Has anyone else had issues with the library? I assume they've been resolved. I haven't heard of anyone else having issues. I only got feedback from one student that there was issues with the library, so I'm not sure if that was related to the particular student, or if there were across the board issues. Okay, Karen's saying she's heard that it's okay again, so that's good. All right, excellent. Okay, any more questions? We're pretty much at the end, so this is your last chance. What is the approximate word count for A3? Okay, that will be on the assignment sheet. Does anyone know that offhand? 1,500, thank you. So 1,500, which is of course plus or minus 10%. So you can go up to 1,650, or you can go below 1,500 by 150 words, but I wouldn't recommend that you do that, because you'll have a hard time covering off all the criteria. Would something along the lines of a psychologist be appropriate? Yeah, depending on the case study, it could be. Yes, it could be. Yep. Or through Department of Education Student Support Service. Yes, certainly. Yep, obviously you'll just need to explain and rationalise why you think that service would be appropriate and what you would hope to achieve with the psychologist. Yep, a psychologist could be under supporting agencies, yes. For Ahmed, we're not to make assumptions, so how can we assume there may be cultural differences? I think it's okay to discuss the fact that there could be some cultural differences without, it's the main thing is you don't make kind of sweeping statements based on a person's culture, but you can certainly discuss the fact that there might be some cultural differences that are conflicting with between home and school, that might be a complex relationship, that Ahmed might be struggling between, you know, adapting from home to school, that kind of thing. Yeah. Sorry, Tara had a question, did she? Any specific format? Sorry, I'm not sure what you mean by that, Tara. Oh, the font, etc. Okay. Well, there are particular guidelines for APA formatting and referencing. I believe that they would have been on maybe the Assessment 1 PowerPoint. So yeah, you definitely want double spacing. Oh, there you go. Karen's got them. Amazing. Look, we definitely, the double spacing is definitely very helpful. And try to stick to the APA formatting as much as you possibly can. I mean, we don't go too nuts on penalising you for those little nuances of APA formatting, but there are certainly some, you know, parts of APA formatting that are quite important. The double spacing is one of them. It's really hard for us to mark and add comments on your assessment when you don't use double spacing. It just doesn't give us enough room to put our comments and so on. So make sure you do that. Okay, this assessment is in third person, not first person. So just the same as your previous two assessments. So no me's, I's, we's. Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Carolyn. Excellent. Do refer to the tip sheet again if you are unsure, and head to the old discussion boards also for any other questions that you have. And that'll be about it, I think. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. It really shows your commitment to doing the best you can in assessment 3. So good on you, and good luck. And you're nearly there. Well done. Thanks, guys. Thank you, ELAs.